One of the tactics that some of these networks use that you mentioned that I don't think is obvious, I'm so glad you pointed this out because I don't think it's obvious to the average person out there. You know, as a host, you know, and as a network, you know, there are options you have. And one of the options employed here that you mentioned and spell out really well is this blacklisting that takes place at these various networks. You point to people like Rudy Giuliani, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Peter Navarro, now we know Dinesh D'Souza, yourself, myself, others who you might have used to have seen until they maybe spoke a truth that went a little too far or didn't participate in whatever networks, you know, silencing really censorship of what they don't want said on their air for whatever their reasons are. And then you see some of the same people on these networks again and again, and you point to these as well, and I can't find it right now, but you point to some of the people like, I don't know, Karl Rove and you know, Mitch McConnell and others who, those people don't speak for the base of America at all, and yet we see them all the time, ad nauseum almost. This blacklisting process is really something because it not only happens to commentators like you and I, at least I was, but it also speaks to candidates like Carrie Lake, who went on a certain network that wasn't talking about 2,000 mules and just talked about it because she thought it was important if you're going to talk about election reform. And she's right. But finding a politician who's going to be so confident in their race as to put their entire race on the line to bring up a truth and know that they might never be invited back on that network, that's a big thing. And these people are to be really commended if they are willing to stand strong and speak the truth despite censorship of various networks. But also, I'm so glad you called that out. What am I leaving out here? Because I just had to make sure that was mentioned because it's so important.
I think you summed it up pretty well. And yes, that's a tactic at every network. And I would bet, not that I can say, you know, definitively, again, contractually, I can't say much about, I think, the network you mentioned, but my guess would be you probably won't see her back on there anytime soon. And when someone goes on and they give too much truth, there's a call that comes from the top, right? And an edict is given and it's disseminated to the bookers. Do not have this person on. Sometimes it's given with conditions. They can't come on unless you get special permission, and we agree to the topic and we pre-tape. We're going to pre-tape. We're going to pull out anything we don't like, and we're going to censor them after the fact if they say something we don't agree with or we don't want to go, you know, to bat for. And that happens all the time. And the list is pretty similar, whether it's MSNBC, Fox, or any of those other conservative outlets that engage in this process out there. And what I do think is great, though, but here's where this is hurting them, is that there's actually a greater audience outside of broadcast media, right? Really, by and large, when you look at the internet and the kind of viewership, say like Steve Bannon's War Room gets, right? And some of these other shows, and then how the digital imprint of this alternative media is so much stronger than the broadcast networks, cable networks specifically, in general, that they're in a lot of fear. They're in a very dicey place right now, especially as we head in 2022, because you'll see people like Carrie Lake out there telling the truth in, you know, on other shows that are not cable broadcast networks. And then it puts the pressure on these conservative outlets and other outlets as to why they are not covering it. So this is, like I said, a collision course with their viewers, because the American people have access to this information elsewhere now, and they now know where to go get it. They're no longer, you know, not sure about what platforms to go to. You know, even my grandma gets online now and finds things like this, whereas that just might not have been true even in 2016, right? So there's the fear of the national security state, there's the fear of the establishment, but now there's also the fear of the viewer who is wising up. So it will be interesting to see if they continue on this path, because if they really cared about being profitable, they really cared about having a good product and integrity, they wouldn't continue on this path. And if they do, it's very, very telling.